The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio, 96.9 FM here in Baton Rouge. Tonight, as you may have heard by listening to the promos, we are going to discuss some of the issues regarding people who are adopted or who have adopted children, just generally adoption in general. And with us tonight is Jeanette Livingston. She's been with the Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board, LAB for short, I guess, for 6 years and chaired their November 2014 rally. She's a wife of 44 years, raised 2 sons, and has 5 grandsons, and she's presently the secretary of LAB and quite busy at that, I suspect. And you are a reunited birth mom, right, Jeanette?
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm sure we're all going to learn something new tonight. Kendall Losey is also here. Good evening, Kendall.
Good evening, Wayne.
As always, it's good to have you here, too. It's great to have the comforting companionship, you know, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about LAB, Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board. Their mission statement, according to the brochure that I have, is, quote, "The mission of LAB is to bring various members of the adoption community together to share different perspectives, seek common understanding, and promote initiatives that pertain to adoption." What does all that mean?
Well, we are the only organization in the state of Louisiana that do what we do. We give conferences. Back in, I think it was 2013, we did a birth parent retreat up in St. Francisville. We had a wonderful turnout, and it was so healing for so many birth parents. And our conferences are very popular with social workers. They get CEUs, and that's very helpful for their continuing education.
Okay, now, I told you that I had prepared questions, but I was likely going to get pulled off of them with things you might say, and now I'm wondering, this birth parent retreat that you mentioned in St. Francisville, I presume you're going to have more someday, right?
We hope to.
Okay, what went on there? Birth parents, the ones that gave the children up for adoption, I guess is what
Yes,
you're
sir.
talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
I'll bet I've known some mothers that felt terrible about that, and,
Yes, sir.
you know, what do you tell them? How do you deal with that? What are some of the issues that they face besides, I guess, guilt?
Yeah, guilt is a big one because we feel like we've failed. But at our retreat, we had a facilitator, and she walked us through that whole, when we find out we're pregnant and the whole plan that we make, the feelings that we go through, and then after the child's born, and the love that we have for these children, and what the plan that we make for them.
Yeah, and like I told a friend of mine who gave her baby up when she was 16, I think. At the time, and actually it's more complex than that because of the hormones and the changes in the emotions and everything, but our minds alter with that sort of thing, and we discussed that here on the show before. But I told her, I said, when you were that age and dealing with all of those things, that probably seemed like the best option for your baby and you.
Yes.
It wasn't a selfish decision. So, you can't really regret decisions you made in the past because you're not living there anymore. It's, and that's the case with all of us, really. But I'm sure that's still a very hard thing for birth parents.
Yes, sir. It's a lot of guilt and the what ifs and if onlys, and
Yeah.
and it's such a hopeless situation at that moment, and it's embarrassing and shameful,
Yeah.
and it's just hard to get through.
And in reality, nobody really knows one way or another. I mean, the decision the other way could have turned out worse for everybody.
Very
You
true.
just don't know.
Very
so
true.
you make the best. We make the best decisions we can right now. And I hear I don't need to counsel people or, and all that. But anyhow, moving on. You guys have a conference coming up in June, don't you? The
Yes,
Louisiana.
sir. June 2nd and 3rd in New Orleans. We're very excited about this. We got some great names, and the name of the conference is A Crisis in Adoption, Giving a Voice to Children Falling Through the Cracks. And one of our main subjects was about rehoming for the adopted children.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you in the brochure here that shocked me, sort of, kind of. There's an April Dinwoody, CEO of the Donaldson Institute.
Yes, sir.
She's going to speak on, the title is Rehoming in Adoption, Understanding the Harsh and Complex Realities. And the first paragraph states, rehoming is the practice in which parents make placements for their child or children without the safeguards and oversight of the child welfare system or the courts. Why would people do that?
It's a mystery to me because, I mean, they're going and on the internet and finding these homes. I mean, there could be pedophiles, any kind of abusers, and it's such a scary situation, and it's getting rampant in the United States, and it's scary.
Could that be because it's so difficult to go through the legal process to get children? And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying, could that because parents just get impatient, or?
I'm not sure. I wonder often if they maybe are embarrassed that they cannot handle that child, because I mean, with all children, whether they're adopted or not, there's problems.
Sure, I can imagine.
Yeah, and so maybe they're ashamed. It's a mystery to me to know that they would even attempt to do that.
But really, well, I did want to ask you: is it any particular demographic that tends to go with these sorts of adoptions, or is it across the spectrum?
I think it's just across the spectrum.
Wow. Well, I guess they can't really know. They don't have the benefit of your knowledge and experience and education, so they may not know. It may not seem that big of a deal to them.
Maybe not.
So I don't know. But that's one of the problems. If you don't recognize that you don't know a lot, it's hard to realize that you don't know a lot. That doesn't make sense, but there you go.
I remember when I heard about that, I was so shocked that people would actually do that. They think Google knows everything. So.
Yeah, well, and the government's bad. The government never does anything right. Of course, that sort of thing. So.
There we go.
Yeah, well, there are attitudes that block us, all of us. We filter the world that way. Okay, so your conference is in Baton Rouge here on June 2nd?
Actually, it's in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
At the
that's
Hilton
right. I was
Garden
looking at the wrong
Inn.
brochure. The Hilton Garden Inn in New Orleans.
Our last one was in Baton Rouge, so we're trying to spread the joy.
No, that's good. Get around, and you'll get there'll be a larger populace to draw from down there.
We hope so.
There's probably more entertainment, but although Baton Rouge is catching up.
No, we're there. We're going to learn. Remember that.
I was talking about the people at the conference, and
right.
during the off hours. Right now, I didn't mean to imply anything.
Sorry.
Yes. Oh, by the way, I'd like to remind our listeners here that this is a pause for thought. We're talking with Jeanette Livingston with the Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board about some of the problems and issues with adoption from all aspects. And you can call in at 343-9927 to share your thoughts or ask your questions or whatever. You just need to be respectful, or, like I said before, we'll make you go away, at least from our studios anyway. Jeanette.
Yes, sir.
Were there any other details about the convention, or where do people go to sign up? Do you guys have a website or anything?
Yes, sir, we do. It's lab.org, I believe.
LAAB.
I'll have to look that.
Okay, no, go ahead.
I don't know it by heart.
You silly. Well, I should have known that too. Actually, it's my fault.
You could call a couple of the members on our board, Della Pressler, and she's in charge of our registration.
You're not going to give her a personal number, are you?
No, I probably shouldn't, should I?
No.
She'd probably kill me.
And that would not be a good idea.
Yeah. And Linda Woods, she's our treasurer on our board. Let's see. The website for Lab is...
You can probably look for it
Let me
a
look.
little later, but
Yeah.
we better find it. We'll take we'll just pause for a little bit.
It's LAAB.org.
Okay,
I
that
think
org
it's
sounds.
laab.org.
That would make sense, but
Yeah.
let Kendall check it since
We have a Facebook page. It's called Louisiana Adoption Advisory
that's a
Board.
good start. That's a good start.
I know that.
Well, that people can find that, yes, but and Kendall will track it down. He has actually corrected me on the air before
Awesome.
because he likes to do that. But we all have our
Just
little.
want to get the right information out there,
That's
Wayne.
right.
You're right.
That's right.
It's
Yes.
all well intentioned, yes.
We-
And actually, I
yeah.
appreciate that. I mean, I like to tell people that if I'm wrong about something, I'd at least like to be at least the second person to know it.
Yes,
you
sir.
know? So, and you were going to say something?
No.
Okay. Okay, I want to go to something a little more specific, and we'll get back to the bigger topics, a little bit. But of course, like I said, we could talk all night on this subject probably. But my dad and his half-brother were taken from their mother by the state up in New Jersey when my dad was somewhere around 8 years old.
That's
Okay.
terrible.
And he never told me much about his experiences, but I was able to pick up some things through inference or the problems he had, when he was younger that my mom told me about. And he had a rough time. One of the things he did tell me was that he just didn't trust people. He said what irked him the most about the many foster homes that he and his brother were put in was that they lied to him.
Oh.
They'd keep him for a little while and then bring him back on a Friday afternoon to the orphanage or whatever and say, hey, don't worry, we'll be back Monday to get you, and then they'd never come back.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, and he said that happened time and time again, and he got to the point where he told me that one time he and his brother were taken in by this one family, and his brother was crying, and he said, Red, don't worry about it, don't even unpack, we won't be staying long. So as a young kid or teenager or whatever he was then, I mean, his attitude was pretty much formed. He was very cynical about people. And I remember him taking us around the New Jersey Pine Barrens, all these houses, some of which were abandoned, searching for all these families. And
Really?
I suppose he was going back trying to find out why they rejected him. And I remember he came out of one house one night that the people were still living there, and he just was silent. I mean, I was a little kid, but I still remember that. He didn't talk about what went on in the house. And,
That's so sad.
yeah. So, but yeah, he was tortured all of his life, and he wasted his life being bitter and an alcoholic and all that to try to hide it. But anyway, getting back, I didn't mean to get off into all that
That's
stuff.
okay.
But are things different today in the foster
They
home
are.
system?
They are. And everybody that I know strives so hard to make the foster care system work so much better for the children. And the
Well,
and the
that's okay.
adoption agencies.
Yeah, okay, but I suspect that money and help are probably in short supply like everything else.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, yes. But I know that the people that I know that are in the Department of Children and Family Services, they have a heart for the children,
Sure.
and they work hard for making it right and doing what's best for the kids, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and it just occurred to me that a lot of the foster families that end up being classified as abusive or committing abuse, maybe it's likely they don't set out to adopt kids specifically to abuse them, but just like birth parents don't know how to handle some things their kids do and they end up abusing them, it just happens.
It does. It does.
And it's just one of those human things that
Yeah.
are unfortunate. And of course, if we had enough people to monitor and screen, it might be. Well, I'm sure it does happen less, as you're saying. Things are improved.
They are.
Okay.
They are.
Kendall, did you?
Yeah, I found the website for the Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board.
Yeah.
It's laaboard.com. You can find phone numbers and emails for that
The
to sign up
conference?
for
Yeah.
the conference.
You can register on the website. Yes.
And then you can have forms you can download to print them all out.
Okay,
everything.
so it's LAA board, the word board.
.org.
.org. Okay.
Yes.
Org, just as in any charitable organization. You're a 501c3, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, getting back to the topic, and my dad in particular, or people like him, is there a general body of information on the emotional and developmental effects of the experiences of foster kids? I mean, just a guess. Have they identified anything that's common that they already know they should look for in any kid or any adult that's been adopted and raised?
Well, a lot of the adoptees struggle with feeling left out and feel they have a lot of abandonment issues, and I think that that's the biggest problems. I'm not an adoptee, so I don't know, and I'm not
Yeah.
an adoptive mother, so that's from the few people that I know that deal with that. That's the two big things that they struggle with.
Sure, they have to wonder why their parents
Yeah.
gave them up. Of course, my dad, he didn't, his mother didn't give him up so much as they were taken
They
from
were
her.
taken, yeah.
But her behavior probably prompted it. And I've always wondered, really, if even in that environment, wouldn't they have been better off with their birth mother? I don't know. She wasn't beating them, but he was seeing some stuff that a kid shouldn't see.
Yeah,
You know.
that's
So
it's
I
not a
don't
good
know.
situation.
No, let me remind the listeners here. You're listening to A Pause for Thought. This is Wayne Parker. We have Kendall Locion as a co-host and Jeanette Livingston with the Louisiana Advisory Board, or Adoption Advisory Board, excuse me, Lab. Here you go. You can call in at 343-9927, 343-9927. I told you that I try to let my humanity show through, Every now and then I have to make myself make a mistake so everybody knows I'm not perfect,
That's
right?
I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, I knew you would. You're an understanding type.
I am.
Yes. Okay. A friend of mine on my Facebook page, on the Facebook page for this show, A Pause for Thought, asked me. She's an adopted child. She's an adult adopted child, and she feels a desperate need to find her birth parents, or at least her birth mother, and she was wondering why. Where does that come from? I guess she hasn't identified any particular emotion that drives her. She just knows that she wants to find her mother. And, of course, she's my age now, so she's close to 60, and time's getting short,
Yes, it is. Well, I think it's a human right and want or need to know where you came from. I mean, don't you want to know where you came from? If you
I
didn't have
do
that?
know. Well, I do know, so I can't really imagine it. I think that's the problem for a lot of us. I mean, I sympathize with people like that, but I really can't say that I know how they feel because I never had to deal with that.
I mean, what if you were raised with two parents that had black hair and brown eyes, and you had blonde hair and blue eyes? Wouldn't you go, gee, who do I look like? I know I would.
Or I'd say, Mom or Dad, did one of you work at a nuclear plant?
And there's also the medical problem,
Yes, that's another question I was asked to
Yes.
propose. Let's
Yes.
talk about that. Medical histories and stuff like that.
Yes, sir.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, if you know your birth family, then you get to know that knowledge of, is there diabetes? Is there heart problems? Is there, any kind of cancer that you need to know about? I mean, when you go to the doctor and you fill out, what did your grandparents have or your father or
Right.
this, adoptees don't get that.
No.
They just have to put nothing. And I can imagine that being frustrating for them.
Yes, and scary and everything else. Now, there's somebody I met recently who was an adult adopted child, and she said that they've changed the laws in this state to where they make it easier to get access to those records, the medical records, only the medical records, not the identity of your parents, or like that. But people of a certain age were grandfathered in, I think, so that one of her siblings who was adopted can get his medical records, but she can't get hers. And
Here in Louisiana.
Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you familiar with any of that, or?
Well, as the board struggles with all this, we try really hard to try to get the legislature to pass these bills. It's gone before the legislature a couple of times, and we've been there trying to boost it through. There's been a lot of restrictions in each of the bills, and so we
Restrictions on whom?
on the adoptee, they have to get permission from the birth parent, or preferably the birth mom. And so the poor adoptee, if he doesn't know that,
Yeah,
then
that was supposed to do, yeah.
it's like a catch-22. It's like, hello? I know. So,
Yeah.
if you think about it, adoptees, they're born with being a certain person with certain parents, and when they're adopted, it's changed. So there's this fine line where he could be Susie, or she could be Susie, and the next time she's Mary or whatever. And so there's an amended birth certificate that they have, but it does not tell them what their biological makeup is, and that's what a human deserves and has a right to have.
Barring physical appearances, differences in appearance, would children have an innate connection or an emptiness if they aren't being raised by their birth parents?
I've read books that they do have that emptiness that they feel, that they need to go search for them. A lot of them do, a lot of them don't. It's just, it
One of those things,
depends.
yeah. Well, we're all unique.
Yeah. But the loyalty
Except
to
me.
their adoptive parents is very prominent, and that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. And of course, I think most kids would be smart enough to realize that
Yeah.
they're their lifeline. They're why they're alive.
A lot of times when these adoptees find their birth parents, they become closer with their adoptive parents.
Huh.
So, that's, I don't know why it is, but, maybe they appreciate what they were given. And,
Who knows? Yeah.
yeah.
I had the 16-year-old, or the friend I have, who was 16 when she gave up her son for adoption. He found her
Uh-huh.
after like 30 years.
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
and she was excited and he was happy and everything was good, but they have a very close relationship, and I'm guessing he and his adoptive mother are good, close too. But that was a nice story. But I wonder, she lives in Louisiana, well, I'm not going to say where, but she, her adopted, or her son, her birth son, found her, and I don't know how he managed that in this state, but
It can be done.
yeah, if you're persistent enough, I suppose you can track it down.
The relationship, when you find your birth child or the birth child finds you, the relationship is a long, long journey. It can be tumultuous or it can be good, and it just depends on the personalities. But, if you stick with it, it's worth it.
I suppose, yeah.
But it's something you have to work really, really hard. There's no books like marriage. There's no marriage books,
Yeah,
or anything like that.
and often you're working alone with no help from the other end. I mean,
'Cause-
if they're not looking for you,
Yeah,
it makes it even harder, I
that's
guess.
true.
Kendall, you're sitting there listening attentively. Have you thought of anything? Are you wondering about anything? And I don't want to put you on the spot, just...
Yeah, I noticed you had mentioned earlier that the Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board was trying to get things passed through the legislature. Is there anything that they are trying to do now, or that that they are trying to do on a constant basis to get through the state legislature at this time?
A couple of weeks ago, we did have a House bill that did come forward, but there was a lot of restrictions, so we begged them to vote against it. We usually have to have a representative that kind of can boost it through, and we've had some good people working for us, and so we're just waiting for it to come up again, and because every now and then it does come up. It's a House bill.
Is there any specifics on it? Is there like anything that any goals that the Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board wants to get through legislature?
Well, the adoptees want the human right that we all regular people have. They just want to be able to go and get their birth certificates, their original birth certificate, with no restrictions, just to be able to get it. Once they're 18, we don't want a 10-year-old having to do that, but,
Right.
They've got to be an adult, and
Right.
they just want to be able to do that. And they have a right just like everybody else does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in this day and age, like I mentioned before we went on the air, when I recently applied for a passport, I was told that there may be problems getting it because my birth certificate does not have the names of my birth parents on it. Now, I was not adopted, but still, simply because my parents' names were not on the birth certificate, they weren't sure if I was going to be able to get a passport. Now, what if you're an adopted child and you can't get your birth certificate at all? I mean, if the waiver doesn't last in Louisiana and Governor Edwards doesn't do anything about it, it's not his fault, but something needs to be done. Louisianians won't be able to fly because the federal government doesn't approve of our security background checks
Yeah.
that allow us to get a driver's license. So we have to get we have to have a passport to get clearance to fly. And if an adult is an adopted child that can't get their birth certificate, they're out of luck.
A lot of times, the bills that the people that are against these bills tell us that they supposedly are protecting the birth mother because they say that they promised them at the child when the child was being born that they would protect them, that they would give them anonymity. As a birth mother, that's not true. I was never promised that. I don't want it, and I don't think that it's in the benefit of the adoptee to have that. He needs to go, or she needs to go and be able to get his medical background and to know where he came from.
But it sounds like these particular legislators' priority is with the birth mother, not the adoptees, not the adult children.
That's true. And it's
And-
not about the birth mom or the birth father, it's about the adoptee.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, here again, though, I guess they feel concerned about if they violate this trust that they think they've given or someone else has given, then people won't. They'll go the non-formal or non-legal route to get their children adopted out, and that could be worse. I'm just I'm guessing, but it's a complex thing, and we really can't explain a lot. We've got about 5 minutes left. We don't want to go by our atomic clock there. It's not quite there, and it's bit me before. But I'm looking here at one of your speakers. Well, two of them actually. Shannon Catanzaro, who's going to be she's a licensed certified social worker, and a Tyra Mercadel, who's an LMSW. What's that?
It's a licensed
Uh-oh.
master's. Is that what that means? I wrote that down.
Oh, good. Well, go ahead and search for it. Anyway,
Licensed master social worker.
okay, cool.
Yes. And
So-
the LC is licensed clinical
Oh,
social
really? I
worker.
thought it was certified. Okay, well, there you go. Anyway.
Learn something new every day. Huh?
Yeah, no matter how hard I try, I tell you what. But they're going to talk about, it says here, the adoption is a lifelong journey, and families often don't understand the complexity their family faces throughout that journey.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those complexities? What do many families face when they adopt a child into their home?
A lot of times the adoptee is very different from the family that he's being raised in, she's being raised in. And I think the whole adoptive parents try really hard to understand them, but it's kind of difficult. And so,
What about kids that are adopted at birth? Say they haven't had the influence, any outside influence prior to being adopted. So
believe it or not, they still have the characteristics of some of the birth family.
okay, well no, they'd have the biology for sure, and if there are certain traits in that family, they're going to come out in
Yes,
the
sir.
child too.
Very much.
You're right, and we don't know. I don't know how much background checks they do for the kids. I know, okay, they screen the adoptive parents, but how much do they learn about the child ahead of time?
Well, as a birth mother, I know that they ask me a lot about my background, the birth father's background, and our looks and anything. But when I was 18, I didn't know a whole lot about the medical of my family because we were all still young, especially my grandparents and my parents. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure glad you came and talked with us today. Tell us again the details of your conference coming up. By the way, this is Jeanette Livingston with the Louisiana Adoption Advisory Board, and they're having their conference in New Orleans, June 2nd, you
Second and
said?
third.
2nd and 3rd?
And you could go to our website at laaboard.org to
Yes.
sign up. You can get 9 credits, continuing education credits, and we hope you all come. It's going to be good.
I hope they do too. And one last question, real quickly here. I'm going to push the envelope.
Okay.
Because I
you
can.
can.
Yes.
That's right.
What can regular folks do? What can people listening to this show that are wondering, wow, I wonder how I could help out? I mean, we all work, most of us work full time, we're busy raising families of our own, but what could just regular folks do to maybe make things a little easier or help your group?
Well, you can donate to the lab. We need money. We have to go get grants to do these conferences. You can be open to the legislature for this House bill that if it does come up, another one comes up, and be considerate of the whole triad situation.
Okay. All right. Well, Jeanette Livingston, I thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Kendall?